So, hello everyone. I'm Raquel Jacobson-Peregrino. I teach at Boston Latin School. I teach 7th grade Earth Science, and I know that my school and my learning, my teaching situation is a lot different than some of yours, but I have a whole lot of kids, and so I've had a whole lot of different challenges. I put this picture on the screen so that you could meet just some of my kids. This was a trip to the Museum of Science in Boston. My kids have a lot of opportunities to be engaged in science out of the classroom, and they come from a wide range of past academic experiences. Boston Latin School is an exam school. Oops, there. Um, Boston Latin School is an exam school, and that means that kids have to take an exam to gain entry. They're invited if they have high test scores and high grades, and they come in at 7th grade. So our student population is a little bit different. They're really, really smart kids, but some of them have had a lot of academic opportunities and a lot of opportunities to visit telescopes, a lot of opportunities to play with computers, but not all of them, and that's always a challenge. Boston Latin School was built in 1635, and so you can see one of the first or second schoolhouses. It was a small group of boys who started. Right here in this corner, you can see 2 students. They were doing an archaeological dig through the City of Boston Archaeology Department, and they're looking at an artifact that was found from they think, from the original Boston Latin School. So kids do have a chance to go out and do things. We have about 2,500 students. So this is our current building in this corner. And here you can see a picture at graduation. There's so many kids in our school that they graduate at the TD Bank North Pavilion in the Seaport District. One of the things that's really neat about, oops, now my computer's doing odd things, about Boston Latin School is this connection that we have to the history of science and the history of scientists in our local area. And so I was trying to encourage my students to explore the YouthAstroNet website, and I gave them a telescope trivia quiz. 5 telescopes are all named after important telescopes or after important astronomers. And so I gave my students a list of these, with these same pictures, these 6 people, and had them try to guess which person was a Boston Latin School alumni, and of course an important astronomer. Any guesses out there? A lot of my students chose Edward Pickering, who is a really important person in getting a lot of the images where they could find the glass plates and that whole thing. And he jumped cannon. He hired a lot of women astronomers for the Center for Astrophysics before it was the Center for Astrophysics. But my kids, being kids, a bunch of them chose Charles Bulfinch because they had been learning about him in their humanities class, and they know he's an important BLS alumni who has done important things in Boston. So of course, he must have a telescope named after him. Some of the things that my students do, again, I teach earth science, and so we do a lot of basic science. The kids do science projects. Some of them are amazing, some of them are just really basic. We learn about a lot of geology, we learn a lot of meteorology, and I try to have my students being really active doing physics. And so here in this corner up here, they're modeling planetary accretion. They're running around trying to be dust particles that eventually can combine into planetoids. Here they're modeling black holes. So not exactly the black holes where they're sucking things in, but sort of a big star that gets crunched and crunched and crunched, and they find how the density changes. And then in this picture over here, kids are measuring the length of the shadow created by a meter stick, and I try to have them do that near spring equinox, winter solstice, and fall equinox, so they can see how it changes. Sorry. Some of my goals in using YouthAstroNet was to increase student engagement. I already do a lot of astronomy. I used to do astronomy in December and January, but we've sort of switched around, and so now I'm doing meteorology then, so my students can predict when they have snow days and things like that. But I'm always trying to enrich my curriculum to get more people engaged. I want my students to have more interest and understanding in astronomy, and I want them to be more competent and confident in using technology. Number of challenges I face. I have about 135 to 140 students every year, and so there's about 27 to 28 in each class. They have a wide range of computer skills. So some of my kids, they can do all sorts of neat programming. They can make websites. When I said, oh, you want to make a wiki? They're like, yeah, sure, no problem. Other kids are still trying to figure out how to log on and upload and download images. Same sort of thing. There's a wide range of their science and their astronomy experiences and interest. Both this year and last year, we had to work around how standardized testing limited our access to technology. And so Erica sent us some computers to help with that this year. But I had kids who were trying to figure out how to use things on their phones and iPads and Chromebooks and various computers. You can request images on all of those devices. I'm not sure if any kids were actually able to process images on their phones, but they tried. And then a more personal kind of challenge was trying to figure out how to share all their work and how to organize it so I wouldn't lose it. Came up with a couple of tricks. One trick was that I created a Google form with a pull-down menu for all their names. The first year I just created a form and they typed their names in and put in what they wanted for their usernames and passwords. But then when I was trying to create all these lists to send to Erica so their accounts could be made, if they had misspelled their name or spelled it differently or put their first name where their last name should go, it took an amazing amount of time to get all those little things straightened out. So a pull-down menu was a really good solution this year. And then another thing that I did, and you can sort of see this right here, I did this year, because again, last year I'm trying to project their usernames and their passwords, and I didn't think I should let students see each other's usernames and passwords. So I was trying to keep everything up there or walking around with lists of papers. This year I just created these little stickers and gave each kid a sticker. I still had to walk around a couple times with some lists of names kids lost their stickers, but it really helped. It also really helped if they were working by themselves. I was still getting some emails as they were doing their homework and forgot how to log in, but the stickers were an easy solution that I wondered why I didn't think of right away. With so many kids really needed to kind of figure out how to work by themselves. And so I gave them this cooking analogy that really helped. And I kept saying it, and eventually they kind of got it. I used the example that if I'm making scrambled eggs, I don't need to look in a cookbook. If I'm making French toast, I don't make French toast very often, so I open up my book to make sure that I have the right ratio of eggs to milk, and that's it. But if I'm making something like the baked Alaska that I've only made a couple times and that's more elaborate, I need to keep looking at the book. I need to keep looking at the directions. And this really helped kids because a lot of times they would look at the directions I would give them and they would watch the video, and then they would get really frustrated with themselves that they would get halfway through requesting an image or trying to process something and get stuck. And so just kind of saying, okay, like do 3 steps and then check, and then do 1 step and then check. And, it's what you would do if you were baking a cake. And that kind of helped. Let me try to move these around here. One of the things, my first big activity that I did with the kids, and this was sort of a response to changing when I teach astronomy. I used to, when I was teaching astronomy in December and January, kids could go outside and look at the night sky, and they could see a lot of constellations, and they could see the moon. They can also see the moon on the way to school and on the way home from school, but to have some good long dark nights was really helpful. But we flip it around with when we are teaching meteorology. And so one of the things that I used to do most years was have the kids record the moon once a day over 28 days. But that gets a little harder now that we're doing astronomy in the spring. Also, a lot of kids would get really frustrated with this assignment because if they lived in a neighborhood with really tall buildings, or if they lived in a neighborhood where they couldn't really walk around and look in the yard and the sidewalk to see the moon, they really felt like they couldn't be looking at the moon every night, or if their parents didn't want them to go outside after dark or later in the night. And so I created a new kind of moon journal. And here you can see it. Here you can see the kids working on it. And let me sort of move this a little bit so you can see some of the pictures. So the kids have already, by the time they're at the point that you're seeing in these pictures, they've already requested images at least the night before, if not earlier. They've created the youth survey, or the survey, and they have played around with the website a little bit. And so they're sitting here creating, processing their images. What I wanted them to do was to request images over a couple of different nights so they could see the different phases, and then also label some of the different features. And so here's a couple of different submissions that some kids have that they turned in. This student right here, she was both really interested in astronomy and in computer science. And she submitted hers in Pictochat. I had taught them how to use Pictochat. And so you can see she's labeled some things pretty well, kind of. Some things I think got a little flipped around. But she has a lot of the features labeled. She has the waning crescent and the last quarter, and that's really good. This kid is really nice because, or the assignment is really nice. It looks really pretty, nice usage of color and light. But then she also has a really nice explanation of why this is a waning moon. And so that was really good, because I realized my goals, it might be hard for all of the students to reach all of my goals, but they all sort of were learning both more astronomy and more technology. And this one right here, this full moon day 17, this is really amazing in terms of a loud piece of art. Here's just 2 that are pretty simple, or straightforward. Here, this one has labeled the Tycho Crater. This kid remembered that I told my students how that in Nahuatl, the word Mexico means belly button of the moon. And so just labeled it belly button of the moon. And the kids also like that they get to use their Latin mare is, of course, see. This kid just played around a lot with color. And so it's really pretty. This was sort of where I got, or one of the places where I got the idea for how to design my next assignment. And so this student, not necessarily completely computer savvy, very busy, didn't always seem to be super engaged, and I think she actually turned this in late according to the date on it. But hers really looks like a postcard. And so she labeled the sun's light, the earth's shadow. She recognized that it was a waning crescent, and it's really nice and artistic. There was another assignment that I cannot find that really just looked like a beautiful postcard. And so that's sort of where the next assignment comes from. If I can get this too. So the second big assignment that I had the kids do, kind of their capstone assignment for both Youth Astronaut and our astronomy unit, was postcards from space. And this kind of, one of the reasons why I have had the kids do a lot of stuff when we were looking at the Earth-Moon system and getting pictures of the moon is some of you may have discovered that you can get really good pictures of the moon. And then the stuff that's sort of beyond the solar system, you can get really good pictures of that stuff. And I didn't really want to frustrate my kids by having them try to get pictures of Jupiter and Saturn. Some of them did try, but I didn't really, I was decided that I should go with what they could get some interesting images of. And so in these pictures, they're all RGB images, mostly of the Orion Nebula. And I have a picture of the Orion Nebula that I think is from the Hubble Space Telescope hanging up in my classroom. A kid brought it to me as a gift a couple years ago. And this is really neat because you can see how taking probably images from roughly the same evening and processing them somewhat similar, you get a lot of variety. And they're all really beautiful and they're all pretty informative. This is a different nebula. This kid also did one of the Orion nebulas, but this picture was much, much prettier. One of the ways that I could sort of keep track of the information that the kids got was give them different ways that they could submit their information to me. So the moon journals, a lot of them were submitted on Google Classroom. Some of them were submitted on wikis. They figured out how to do the wikis and put them on YouthAstroNet. I originally thought that I would be running this program as more of an extra enrichment program. But when I began to ask kids who wanted to do it, I realized it would be good for all of my kids, that they would all be able to learn some really good stuff and gain some really good skills. But I wasn't sure if doing the aside and teaching kids who were less computer savvy how to create a wiki and post it there was a good use of my time. So I got things emailed, things were submitted on Google Classroom. But some of these you can see are really beautiful. On Google Classroom, you get this, you click it, it opens up, it looks great, and you can grade them and write notes. But I wanted kids to be able to see each other's work in a way that was easier. And so I created this Padlet. And if you have, I think you get 5 Padlets for free. And so this is a screenshot of the Padlet that I had them do for Postcards for Space. Sorry, because I have 5 sections, and I had a different Padlet where I was collecting different questions from them. I didn't want to erase it. All the classes went into this singular Padlet. It was really nice. I asked my own daughters, who are sort of college age, what they thought about the Padlet. Should I make it a requirement for them to post their work, students post their work in a more public area, or should I also allow them to sort of post their work more privately? And so my kids said, yeah, I needed to give them the option. that if they wanted to post it in a public way where all their classmates could see it, the gallery on Padlet would be great. But for kids who were not that confident that they did a good job, or who just were shyer, that I should allow them to continue to post their work sort of in a more private way on Classroom or as an email. I think a couple of kids you can see here, these kids right here did post their work as a wiki on the website. And so if you click it, you can actually go to the wiki and see it. And so that was kind of an interesting choice that they had. With this assignment, you can see they needed to request images and process images. I had them watch a couple of videos beforehand, and then they could just kind of keep creating them. Are there any questions?
That was fantastic, Raquel.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed hearing about all the different ways you engaged your students. I feel like there's even more things that I didn't realize. It was wonderful. So I actually do have a couple questions. As far as so you talked about kind of some of the challenges of engaging that spectrum of students' experiences. What were some of the things you found most useful in keeping them all engaged while allowing them to kind of work at their own pace?
Your website is great. And this is really funny because some of my colleagues will always say, oh, that kid, they're supposed to be working on the computer and they're watching a YouTube video. And so the very first time I had the kids on the computers, some kids are still trying to figure out how to log in. And some of the kids had finished that survey and they had requested some images. And then I'd walk over and go, what are you doing? And they're like, this is the game that you told me to play. And so they were discovering all sorts of really fun things on the website that I didn't have time to find. And so the first year, I think when one kid found like the maze kind of challenge game, they all sort of started doing that. And then that game didn't work this year. And so then they were doing some of the different computer challenges. And so that was really good. One kid, really quiet kid, and he's just one of those kids where he just seems to plug along. He kind of smiles. You think he's enjoying things, but he never really was like out there. He's just really, really shy. And the last year, I told the kids, I gave them some warning, or by Tuesday or whatever, you need to have an image of something requested, the RGB images. And the night before, I reminded them to do that and had them watch the video. And so he came to class and he said, what do I do now? I'm like, what do you mean? He said, I did it last night. I thought you wanted us to like create the processed image for homework. I'm like, oh, do another one. And he's like, I already did 5.
Wow.
I'm like, okay, you can help everyone else. And so suddenly this kid who really would normally just kind of be hanging out, doing the whatever, was the expert. He now had, because he had created 5, he had done more than I had. And so he was walking around the room just helping everyone else out. And that is like a really nice thing to see. This year, I didn't have anyone who did 5 in advance, but I had some kids, I think they didn't really like their study hall teacher or something. So like, oh, can we come in and work on them? And so they were really helping each other out and, kind of building that sense of community and camaraderie and competence that projects like this can do.
Fantastic. That's so wonderful. It's so great to hear. It's so wonderful to hear from educators how different students can engage with the portal. That's awesome that a kid did 5 all on their own, right?
It was 3, but
But still, going home, thinking there was an assignment to do 1 and got excited to do more.
Yeah, I did have kids who And sometimes they would be like, the kids like, oh, I'm not good with computers. I just don't know how to do this. And then they're like, how many images can I request? I'm like, well, as many as you want. It's like, it's free. And so like, I requested 50. I'm like, okay. Like, I don't know if they looked at all of them. But some of the kids and would request a lot. And it would be not necessarily boys or girls or kids who were like, seemed really tech savvy. They would just, it was arranged. It was really a way to like bring more kids into that science fold.
Wonderful. Do you have any other kind of pieces of advice for educators getting started with this, or something maybe your first year that you remember back on that you were less confident about as you were getting started, that now you're like, oh, well, of course, I should have been thinking about it this way?
Don't worry about so much about the kids. Well, I had to encourage the kids that they weren't going to break something and that it was completely okay to poke around the website, that you guys had really made it so that it would be user friendly. And they did explore a lot. There was one day where I was using computers and iPads and all sorts of things. And another time when I had like old Chromebooks and new Chromebooks, and they all worked. They might be a little bit different in terms of how a couple like really minor things worked, but it really did work pretty much on any machine. And some kids would go, well, can I just do this on my phone? Like if they didn't like the machine that I gave them. And so they tried.
Yeah, it is actually possible to image process on your phone. It's more difficult because the buttons are really small and what you can see is hard. So if you're not, I do it all the time, so I know what I'm doing and I can see it a little more easily, but it is possible to do it on a phone.
Yeah, I figure some kids write term papers on their phones. So
yeah. I don't know how to do that,
but I couldn't do that. But some of the kids could do amazing things with just their phone. I think the first year, I thought pretty much all the time kids needed to be working on their own machine. But this year, because we were trying to work around the technology restrictions, I told them they could work together. And that actually was really interesting to see them to like bring in their different strengths and weaknesses. I don't think that a group bigger than 2 would work very well, but pairing up was a nice challenge. Yeah.
Fantastic.
One of the things that I think really helped the kids this year, which would probably be completely unique to this year, is because they already had an idea about how things look so different through a telescope versus the lovely posters that we might have hanging up in the classroom or what they see in the news, is that when the images of the black hole came out, they kind of got how that could be done, like how you could get this data from all these other places, put it together to make an image. And some of the kids, like I sent them the link to the Cambridge Science Festival stuff. And so when we came back after April vacation, because that ran during vacation, a number of the kids had gone to the lectures.
Really?
And they weren't necessarily friends that were there. And, some of them had probably taken themselves or their parents had taken them. But they were like all comparing notes on going to the lectures at the Science Center on the black hole, or the pictures of the black hole. So that was really cool.
That's amazing. That's super cool. Yeah, actually, one thing, I should post it on the YouthAstroNet portal as well. We have an image that we shared on our Micro Observatory Facebook page. There's actually a comparison of that black hole image to a Micro Observatory image to show you how tiny that is in the field of view of the night sky. It's
wow.
1/1 billionth of a pixel, I think. I have to double check that number, but something along those lines. So the whole black hole image is 1/1 billionth of a Micro Observatory pixel.
That's amazing.
That's
unfathomable.
Even more impressive, right?
Yeah.
That's so tiny. Yeah, I should post that on the portal for everybody to see. Well, thank you so much for sharing. This was fantastic.
You're welcome.
I'm going to stop the recording right now.